With the help of Hashem, we are learning Rosh Hashana Daf Chav Dalid. We left off on Daf Chav Dalid, Amud Aleph, all the way on the top line. We are continuing to learn more about the detailed questions that the Beis Din would ask of the Eidim as to specifics, where the moon appeared, how did the moon look like, as we'll see in a moment. We're going to speak about a scenario where Eidim only saw the new moon through a reflection. They saw it reflected in the water, they saw it reflected in something else, or they saw it through clouds, whether that's considered a valid testimony or not. And in the Mishnah, Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph, we're going to learn about the procedure that was used for Beis Din to declare the Chodesh sanctified. The Av Beis Din would say the words Mekudesh, and the others there would respond Mekudesh, Mekudesh. And then we will learn a four-way machlokes Tanoim, two in the Mishnah and another two that the Gemara brings in a Braisa as to did they do it every month? You have actually four options. No matter whether the prior month was a deficient month, whether the prior month was a full month, do you always on the Rosh Chodesh make that procedure of Mekudesh and everyone responding Mekudesh, Mekudesh? Is it only done on a Chodesh Chaser? Is it only done on a Chodesh Mali? And as we'll see, we have a four-way machlokes Tanoim. And in the Mishnah Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph towards the bottom, we're going to learn how Rabban Gamliel had the form of various moon shapes. In other words, he had images. Perhaps they were not only images, two-dimensional, but perhaps they were also three-dimensional images of the lunar crescent in various sizes, in various positions, as we can just understand that many people, they need to have visual aids when you question them, how did the moon look like? Was it facing this way? Was it facing that way? Was it this thin or this thick? So some people are able to describe it using words. Many people need to have visual aids. He had such visual aids, and that's going to lead us here into the big sugya that we have it here at Rosh Hashana Chav Daled, as we have it one other place in Avodah Zarah Daf Mem Gimel regarding the lav. It says in the Torah right after God records the Aseres Hadibros and Parshas Yisrei, Lo sasun iti, you shall not make with me. What does it mean, you shall not make with me? And Chazal interpret that verse to mean Lo sasun kidemus shamoshai, don't make images of my servants. This is the whole source of the sugya of whether we are allowed to make statues, whether perhaps we are even allowed to make pictures. And who are God's servants? Well, we are God's servants. The heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations, the malachim, and there is a lav making their images. So we're going to have a lot of back and forth, but we will conclude that indeed it is a problem making an image of the moon. So therefore, how did Rabbi Gamliel even have such images? We're going to learn tangentially that Amira la'akum, that if I am not allowed to do something, even if a goy is allowed, I'm normally not allowed to tell a goy to do it for me, but you have exceptions. One will be when it's b'makayim mitzvah, as we'll see the case coming back to Rabbi Gamliel, hiring people making images of the moon for him, and ultimately this will be the nakud of the whole daf, that there are two issues. There is a biblical prohibition making a forbidden image. And as we will see, a forbidden image, we paskin, will include a protruding human form, a statue of a human being. Included in the making a forbidden image, according to most poskim, is not only a statue of the sun and the moon and the stars, but even a picture is also prohibited. And then there is another issue, and that is, since many people served Avodah Zarah in those days, it's forbidden for me to own a statue because people might suspect that I am, God forbid, worshiping it. That's a rabbinic prohibition, and we're going to have to see how Rabbi Gamliel was not bound by either of these when it came again to these images, to these forms that he had of the moon, which he used, which was necessary many times when witnesses came to testify, and much more. Let us start Chevron Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph all the way on top of the Amud. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'ar kol nidbar dvarim. So the Mishnah said that one of the questions that they asked the witnesses, obviously one separated from the other, one individual, and then the other individual was Kama Hoya Gavoya. How high in the sky did you see the moon? Let's remember again that the new moon is generally seen dafka at the end of the day, and that's because the moon is to the east of the sun in the beginning of the month, all the way up until the half of the month, but especially mamish in the beginning of the month, it's right behind the sun, it's trailing the sun. So right after sunset, there's going to be moonset. When the sun is in the horizon, because of the thinness of the crescent of the moon, and normally people cannot see it with the naked eye. So there's a very small window where people would be able to see the new moon before, right after sunset, before the moon set. Now, truth be told, just to make something else clear, that it's possible to see the new moon on the night going into the 30th. And if it won't be seen then, normally it's going to be seen in the next night. Now, in the next night, again, it's going to be seen before sunset, but there the moon is further away from the sun, so the crescent of the moon is already larger. The moon is higher up in the sky. The moon is going to be another 12 degrees further east, away from the sun, again, which will allow you, sometimes the moon is going to be seen only very near the horizon. When it's already in the second day in the month, you can see the moon a little bit higher up. So they would ask them for the height, and also which way was the moon pointing. And again, as we mentioned yesterday, that when it says lifnei hachama, the point is that the pigima of the moon is never facing the sun. So which way is it facing really will have to do with the next question that the Gemara is going to speak about, and we mentioned this yesterday. And that is that even though in the Mishnah the words that were used was litzfaina, lidraima, and the Mishnah made it clear that safaina is lifnei hachama, and lifnei hachama, which means west of the sun, is something that will never happen. The moon will never be to the west of the sun in the beginning of the month. And if they say so, we already know that they're not saying the truth. So there's another topic that sounds the same, but it's not the same, that the Gemara will begin to address right now, and that is, just pay attention now. When you see the sunset in the beginning of a month, here in LA or in any other place, and then you see the moon, and again, you'll see in the beginning of the month that right after sunset, you'll see a little crescent of the moon. If you will simply pay attention as to, is the moon towards the south of the sun, or is the moon in the northern side of the sun? They're both setting in the west, but it will change. That's something that changes. So says the Braisa Tanach that if the Edom say that the moon was seen, let's find out that the new moon was seen to the moon's north, means when we're facing west over here, wherever the sun came down, the moon will be a bit more to the right. It's going to come down, it's going to go down, it's going to set in the west a little bit more to the right of where the sun set. Then the Varav Kayamim, then they're saying the truth. Says the Braisa, if lidroima, but if the witnesses say, they saw the moon setting a little bit towards the south, then lo yomar klum. So it says in one Braisa. Question is, v'hatanya ipcha, but we learned the opposite. It says in a Tosefta that lidroima the Varav Kayamim. But let's find a lo yomar klum. Fakert, it's only the moon is going to be to the south of the sun. So the Gemara says, like Kasha, it depends on the time of the year. This is something that varies. Kan, the first Braisa, that tells you that the moon will be even further north than the sun when it's setting. That's b'yimai sachama, that's in the summer, and it makes so much sense. Because as we mentioned, the sun really is traveling 1 degree every day, but it's not always staying on top of the equator. The sun, for 6 months in the year, is going 1 degree, half of the 6 months, towards the north, till you're in the height of the summer. During the winter, it's going to be on the southern side of the equator. The moon is approximately running on that same track, but the moon is going 12 degrees a day more than the sun. So if we're going towards the north, and already in the beginning of the month, the moon is 12 degrees even further north, then of course it's going to set further north, and the same is the opposite in the winter in the south. And Khan, the second Braisa is b'maisak sham. Okay, now let's speak about height. So again, speaking about height means if they are going to say that the moon was really high up in the horizon, we know they're not saying the truth. Because in the beginning of the month, the moon is very close to the sun, which is why to us it appears very thin. Second day, it's a little bit further away. It's 12 degrees a day. It's very simple. Now, one of the familiar sticks that we're going to use here as a measuring item was a goad, was a mardas. It was some sort of stick with a point at one end that people would use to poke their animals to get them to move. So they would ask them, Tanach Rabbanan, Oimer, Echad Oimer Gevaya Beis Mardois, if one witness has said, in responding to high, how high up was it over the horizon? Or the height of more or less 2 mardois, 2 of these sticks. Here you have a good picture here about the sticks. And the other one said 3, even though they're not saying exactly the same, but this level of discrepancy is accepted. Most people don't know how to differentiate. It's, more or less 2 or 3, even though he's saying, no, it was 2. The other one said it was 3. They're saying the same thing. But if it's more than 1 mardas height off, that level of discrepancy, but echad omer gimel ve'echad omer hey, then we cannot combine them together. And I want you to know there's a big chiddush here. Because now that we accepted that everyone can be off 1 mardas height, when you could have counter-argue. So the guy that said 2, really it was 3. He was off by 1. The guy that said 3, it was really 4. If it was really 4, everyone is only off 1. No, we don't do that. If the difference between the 2 witnesses is 2, then we discount them, but we don't really discount them. We discount them, but we don't. What do I mean by we don't? If there was another witness that came that month and told the Beis Din, let's say, that he saw it 3 mardas high, or 4, or 4. So the guy that said 4, you can combine either with the 3 or with the 5. Or if another witness says it was 3, then the 2 3s come together. Another witness says it was 5, the 2 5s come together. In other words, you cannot combine the 2 that have a 2 mardas discrepancy, but they're still here. And if there's another witness that is saying the same or is only off by 1, then they do combine together. Okay, Tanach Rabbanan. I want to make just a quick intro. What we're learning right now should not be compared to Kiddush Levana. It's very common that by Kiddush Levana, the sky is not perfectly clear, and people see the new moon, so to say, that we only, al pi Kabbalah, we only start to say Kiddush Levana from the 7th day of the Moiled, only until more or less the middle of the month. But what happens if it's a little bit cloudy, and you can see the moon through the clouds? For Kiddush Levana, that's not a problem. We're not speaking about Kiddush Levana that we learned about on Sanhedrin. We're learning about Kiddush HaChodesh. Here, 2 witnesses biblically have to come to a Beis Din, and they have to declare that which way they saw. So seeing means seeing it directly. So Tanach Rabbanan Ra'inu B'mayim, if a witness or witnesses say we saw the moon reflected in the water, but we saw it reflected in the water, not going to be good. Or Ra'inu Ba'ashashis, Machloikis. Ashashis either means they saw it reflected in a lantern, or they saw it through some sort of glass. And I want you to know, it's not the glass that people use in glasses. And there was a lot of discussion about this a few hundred years ago. The glasses that we wear does not pose any problem of sight. It actually restores your sight to the way it should be, let's say 20/20, or something close to that. Here we're speaking about a glass, even if ba'ashashis means they saw it through a glass, it's not the type of glass that we have right now. It was a thick glass, it distorted things, so it wasn't a clear vision. Or, ro'inu ba'avin, we saw it through the clouds. Says the Braisa, ein ma'id and olive, they are not qualified witnesses. Not only that, if they say, we saw half of the moon in the water, half of the moon we saw through the clouds, half of the moon through the ashashis, again, lohoir, that it's a different order. Again, ein me'id and olive. So the Gemara says the second clause is completely superfluous. Hashtok, Gemara is asking, Hashtok kol yamar teloi. Now that the Braisa began saying that even if they saw the whole moon, let's say in the water, they're not accepted as witnesses, so chetzia, if they only saw half of it, that's worse, miboya. So the Gemara clarifies, no, the second case is they saw half direct. They saw the other half reflected, same thing through the clouds, again, that's what we're familiar with. They saw half of it clear, the other half was through a cloud. Elyahu kamar, chetzia b'mayim and chetzia b'rakia. Or chetzia through the clouds and the other half was not concealed at all, it was exposed. Chetzia b'ashashis, chetzia b'rakia. You would think now it's good. Still, the Braisa says, ein me'idin, because yes, we are in the beginning of the month, and yes, my friends, the moon is very skinny, and yes, there's a possibility that there are clouds that could present themselves in the form of a crescent, and they can be luminous because it's right after sunset. Don't forget, too much after sunset, you will never see the moon. It went under the horizon, and yet people can confuse a cloud as we'll see clear in the next statement. Tanach Rabbanon, what happens if the witnesses say, Ro'inu, we saw it, but then we didn't see it anymore? So the Brisa says, well, then they can't be witnesses. What does that mean? The Gemara says, what does that mean? Does it mean that if you see the new moon, you have to see it until you come in front of the Beis Din? The Gemara about kol hachi chazi kol hachi chazu va'azli. The witnesses see it the whole time until they come to Beis Din? That's absurd. Of course they don't. You see it and then you don't. What's wrong with seeing it and then you don't? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya hachi ka'amar. This is the problem. There are times that you are not looking to see the new moon. You're schmoozing with your friend, you're looking Shema Su'um Marim Enechem, you're looking at Hashem's marvelous heavens. You're looking up. You were not trying to look dafka for the moon. So when you were not paying attention, Epis, you noticed the moon. And then you said to yourself in your mind, oh perfect, I can see the new moon, I'm going to go testify. When you wanted to focus on the moon, you no longer saw it. That's where it's not good. Verstehst? No, we saw it incidentally, without intention of looking for the new moon. And then, when we told ourselves, okay, now let's take a good look at it to go to Beis Din. V'shavnu, or v'shavnu lira oisei midatenu. And now when we refocused to see it with a greater amount of awareness, of mindfulness, then we no longer saw it. That's what the Brisa says. And all of them may not testify. My tama, again, Amor, because we say, Chazal says, that maybe kuvisa de eva ba'al mohu dechazi. Kuvisa means a crescent. Eva means a cloud. Maybe there was a cloud that looked like a moon, and therefore when they were not mindful, so it appeared, and that's taka why when they focused on it, they didn't see it anymore. Either because they realized it's a cloud, or because the cloud was blown away, the form of the cloud changed. They have to see it with the kavana of looking for and seeing the new moon. Okay, says the Mishnah. Now we're going to go into the procedure, and as we mentioned in the intro, in the Mishnah there are two opinions, and the Gemara is going to bring another two opinions. Says the Mishnah, this is after the Sanhedrin, they interrogated two of the many people that came. They have at least two witnesses. They have the Re'iyah. Beis Din also knew the Cheshbon. Like we mentioned, if Beis Din knows that you don't have 29 and a half days from the past Moilad, then even though they would interrogate the witnesses, they would confuse them. So Beis Din knew that it's possible. Two witnesses taka saw it. And the only two options, again, is either the moon will be seen on the night going into the 30th. If they see it then, no one comes to Beis Din at night. Then the following day, Beis Din will make the 30th into day number 1, changing the numbers, making last month into a deficient month. Or if no one saw it on the night going into the 30th, just there's another option. It's possible, since day number 2 from the Moilad, the moon is another 12 degrees away from the sun. It's already 24 degrees away from the sun. Then the moon can be seen even before sunset. Near sunset, even though the sun is still in the sky, but it's not that bright. And there were times that witnesses saw the moon on the 30th, not night before, on the 30th, before the end of the day, and they had enough time to tell Beis Din, and Beis Din still could have made that day at the end of the day into day number 1. So day 30 can become day number 1, rendering the prior month a chodesh chaser, or no, they only saw the night going into the 31st. They would come to Beis Din, they would testify on day 31. Now we know there's no day 31, we know that, but they would testify, and Beis Din will say, no, 31 is day number 1. Last month Taka had 30 days, but today is day number 1. Now let's go. The ceremony, it was that the Rosh Beis Din Oimar, the head of Beis Din, would declare Mekudesh, and V'chol Ha'am, everyone that was there, the other Dayanim, the people, Oinen Achrav Mekudesh. Parenthetically, many people have a minhag today by a wedding, that after the Chassan puts the ring on the Kala and he affects the halachic Kiddushin, that the Lashon is in MERCAVA. Mikudeshes, the Rav will say, and everyone will say, Mikudeshes. It comes from here, a zecher to what happened by the Kiddush HaChodesh. And that's a compliment over here. In other words, the fact that the Jewish people are compared to the moon, and specifically the women are compared to the moon, and that the women have a minhag we mentioned to celebrate Rosh Chodesh. Okay. Now, Tanach holds this ceremony is done bein shenira b'zmanoi, bein shelenira b'zmanoi, mikachin oisoi. Nira b'zmanoi means since be'emes, the moilad between one and the other is 29 and a half days. So we are expecting to be mekadesh day 30 into day number 1. So whether the prior month is deficient, that's nira b'zmanoi. Whether it was cloudy, and only day 31 is becoming Rosh Chodesh, regardless, this ceremony happened. However, second opinion in the Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok Oimer, and by the way, we paskin like the second opinion, and we're going to learn another two in the Gemara, that im loy nira b'zmanoi. If the moon was not seen on the 30th, not the night going into the 30th, not towards the end of the 30th, if the 30th was not turning into 1, if last month is not turning into a deficient month, then ein mekachin oisoi. Then this ceremony of the Beis Din saying mekudesh and everyone saying mekudesh was not done. You know why? Shekvar kichu shamayim. In other words, since a lunar month will never have more than 30 days. Day 31, my friends, even if no witnesses come, there won't be day 31. And by the way, Beis Din, even according to the Tanach, Beis Din can only do the ceremony if they had witnesses. It's very possible that it was cloudy for a week. If no one saw the moon, then L'Kula Alma, you didn't make the Mekudesh, because that's the way it is. That's the way Hashem made the world. A lunar month is 29 and a half days. You're not going to have more than a 30-day lunar month. So the Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok holds, even if witnesses came, and you interrogate them, and all's good and fine, and now you have him, but you don't make the ceremony. You only do it if Rosh Chodesh, mamish, like we learned yesterday or 2 days ago with the torches. When did they light the torches? Only if the prior month was a chassid. Certain things were not done if the prior month was not deficient. Says the Gemara. Yes?
Rabbi, just to clarify, if witnesses didn't see it on the 29th, but they did see it on the 30th, meaning that it would be a malay, they would still come testify?
Sure. Witnesses would not everyone knew about it, and they would come. People knew. You see the new moon, you go to Beis Din.
Even on Shabbos or no? Only
even on Shabbos. They always came. That we learned that a few daf ago, because since there's a mitzvah to be mekadesh al pi re'iyah, you would come. And even if they wouldn't make the ceremony, but there was a mitzvah to have people coming to the Beis Din. Now, Rosh Beis Din v'chulei. First of all, how do you know about the ceremony? Where do you see in the Torah a hint that you have to make a declaration? Maybe just testify, and now we know, but the ceremonial, mekudesh, how do you know that the Rosh Beis Din declares it? When it says in Parshas Emor, Vayedaber, that's the word. Vayedaber Moshe es mayadei Hashem. Moshe spoke. What does it mean he spoke? The pshat is, he gave over to the Jewish people all of the mitzvahs that God gave him to give us over. But here it means, mekana remez, sherosh Beis Din oimer mekudesh. Then when it says, v'chol ha'am oinem achrav mekudesh, how do you know that people respond to that? Amar Papa, the Amar Kra, mamash over there in Emor, asher tikru'u oisam, that you shall declare them. So even though it says oisam them, but God wrote the word oisam in the Torah without a vav, which allows you to change the vowels and to read the words, not oisam, but atem, which means that you shall declare. So not only does Moshe declare it and the subsequent Rosh Beis Din, but the people make a declaration by responding mekudesh. Another answer, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, when it says Eile Heim Moyadai. Heim means they. The word they is extra, mamish. It could have says Eile Moyadai. Eile Moyadai. Yeah. Heim means Heim Yoimru, they should declare that it's Moyadai, that it's a designated holy day. Now, fine, both sources have a remez that there is a response. But why do the responders have to double the expression? The Av Beis Din says, the Rosh Beis Din says Mekudesh. Let people say Mekudesh. So, frag the Gemara Mekudesh trei zimna lamali. Here the answer is, because it says Mikro'ei, declarations. Now again, the pshat is that this is in reference to all of the many Yomim Tovim. But the drush is that there are two declarations for every Rosh Chodesh. Mikra'oi Kodesh. Okay, so the first opinion in the Mishnah is that this ceremony is done every month, no matter how long the month is, or how short the month is. Second opinion in the Mishnah is that if the month was not seen on the 30th, the night going into the 30th, during the day of the 30th, in other words, if the prior month is a full month, then on day 31, there is no such declarations. Tanya, says the Gemara, we learned in the Braisa, opinion number 3. A Tana whose name is rarely mentioned, a Tana called Pulemoi or Pulimoi, and you do have sometimes, it sounds a little bit like a Roman name, or it sounds like a Greek name, and it's not the only time. That's another topic, but let's go weiter about Shem Yisrael. Pulimoi Oimer, mamish the opposite of the Mishnah. Yeah, it's only done sometimes, but you know when? If it's Bismanoi, Ein Mekachenoi. Imagine, if witnesses saw the new moon, then on the 30th, which is normally when it should be seen again, because every month should be less than 30 days. So on day 30, you should already see the new moon. Since it's the way things are really, then you don't need to be Mekadesh it. Rashi writes the words that this declaration of Mekudesh is some sort of way of like insisting on something. It's like overcompensating. There's no need to overcompensate. There's no need to support it. Only Shaloi Bezmanai, if the prior month was not deficient. Now it's already day 31. Only day 31 is Rosh Chodesh. That's not true. The emes is that the Mailot happened before, a couple of hours before. All theoretically, I'm saying. But still, so when something is not exact, it needs support, then you're Mekadesh. And now, opinion number 4, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Bachlal, he disagrees with this whole system of this whole ceremony he doesn't have. Benkach ein mekatchen oisoi. The first wide line. And how does he prove it? From a negative. Since it says regarding Yovel in Parshas Bahar, Vik ukidashtem eis shnas hachamishim, that you shall sanctify the year, the 50th. You meaning Beis Din. When do we sanctify? A year we sanctify. Shana mata mekadesh. You never make a ceremony to sanctify, to declare Mekudesh on any of the months. So people knew because Beis Din accepted the witnesses. And then they sent a shluchim. Originally they would light the torches, but this whole back and forth, according to the 4th Tana, does not exist. Now, what do we paskin like? Omar Rabbi Yehuda, Omar Shmuel. The halach is like the second opinion in our Mishnah. The halach is like Rabbi Elazar ben Abtzadik. The halach is that yes, there was this ceremony of the Rosh Av Beis Din, the people answering, but only when Beis Din declared the 30th into day number 1. Only when the prior month was deficient. Only when you're being Mekadesh the Chodesh Bismanai. And Amar Abaya Afanon Namitanina. You know what? You're right, and I'll prove it to you from a Mishnah that we're going to have on Chafei Yom Beis. What does it say in the Mishnah soon? That Ru'u Beis Din v'chol Yisrael. Like what happens if on the night of the 30th everyone saw it? But by the time the witnesses came to Beis Din, by the time Beis Din dealt with it, by the time they interrogated the witnesses, it's already dark. Too late. Even though everyone knew that the new moon already appeared yesterday. It becomes a full month. But it doesn't say it doesn't say that they're mekadesh tomorrow, because taka you're not mekadesh at all. That's a proof. Amabaya counters the Gemara. That's not a proof. That the Mishnah needed to emphasize mu'ubar itzrachalei. In other words, the Mishnah there in Daf Chafei Amud Beis is not going into whether you made the ceremony or not. It's just emphasizing this novelty that Sal Kadai Techamina, Hoyel Viro'uhu Beis Din v'chol Yisrael, that if the moon that was visible to everyone on the night going into the 30th, everyone knew that it's already, the 30th is not going to be the 30th. Everyone knew that the 30th should be day number 1. They saw the new moon. So you would think that in a case where if Risama or Ifarsima, that if it's publicized, and because of that, Beis Din should not declare day 31. No, then you have to make it day 30, even though the witnesses came so late, or they finished interrogating so late. Don't extend the month. That's the chiddush. No, that even though that we know that there was a new moon, but during the times that we established the calendar based on the seeing or on the sightings of the new moon, it's not just about them seeing it, it's about them seeing it, about them going to Beis Din, and it's about Beis Din's declaration. And if Beis Din did not declare it, people understand that. Everyone saw the new moon, but still it doesn't mean it was Rosh Chodesh, because it's Beis Din and their declaration that determines when the new moon indeed will begin. Okay. So
does that affect the entire year?
But it affects the entire year. What will happen really is that the next month they will for sure see the moon the earlier time, and maybe even the next month again the earlier time. That will be sometimes where you had this anomaly, the unusual fact that 2 months in a row were deficient. If 1 month was made too long, then it's going to, over the next month or two, it's going to adjust itself. Oh, yes.
Here's maybe a dumb question, but if this was decided at some point during the day, right, whatever, it's in the afternoon, the witnesses come, they interrogate them. When does everybody say Hallel? They say Mincha?
No, that's not a dumb question at all. It's not a dumb question at all. That's a big question. In other words, normally, Danny, that's why I mentioned today that people always think about one possibility of them seeing the new moon the night going into the 30th. Then it's a much easier. And not only that, Hallel, Danny, Musaf. That's a carbon Musaf. That's the whole thing that in the base. That's why we learned this before. We learned this, I think it was in Beitza or in Sukkah, that there was a time that they made a takana that during the times of the Beis HaMikdash that min mincha ulamayla you don't accept Eidim anymore. That was the whole thing. But after the Churban Abayis, so there's no more carbon musaf, which is what we really care about. Now Hallel is a minhag. That's the thing. It's a minhag, so they missed the minhag. Guys, Hallel on Yom Tiv is an obligation. A rabbinic obligation, midrabanan. Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is a minig, and you're right. You're right. If they came too late, then people were unable to do Hallel. Okay. Now, the next Mishnah seems to be something simple, but that's a very important sugya that we're going to learn now. And a sugya about when Hashem says, as we'll see again, there's going to be two issues, that we should not make images. Now, we know graven images, three-dimensional images are certainly problematic. We'll see of what. Even pictures, even not protruding images, flat images, drawings, might also be problematic. This sugya is discussed here because the Mishnah is recording the fact. Says the Mishnah that after we learned about all of these questions that the Beis Din asked, and we can experience this because when people learn the Mishnah, some people don't need visual aids. Or they don't have, if we have kaven with the pictures, then you're good. But if you don't have kaven, what do you do? So you don't have a picture, like all of the people that can't see what's going on over here on the Zoom. So imagine, witnesses come, did you see it? The pointing to the north, pointing to the south. How high up was it? People don't know what you're talking about. So the easy solution will be, the mus, tsurais, levana, hoyo loy le Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel had images. Now, I don't know if that's so good. Images of the lunar crescent. And he had it in various sizes and in various positions. We're going to see soon whether it was three-dimensional, which it was. Or even according to some Rishonim, they learned it was just a drawing. Doesn't matter. But he had it. Why? And by the way, he had it both batablet, he had it on tablets, and ubakoisid. And he had certain things that were hanging on the wall. He didn't keep it open, exposed. He kept it ba'aliyasi in his upper chamber. Because don't forget, this was not needed every day. You're not going to enter the Sanhedrin and have pictures of the moon all over the place. But whenever they were judging that case, so when Adam were interrogated, he would take them into this Aliyah, into this second story room. Shebohem mara es hahedyotos. People that were hedyots, that they needed visual aids. So he had for them various shapes, and like this it was easy. Did the moon look like this? Did the moon look like that? Sounds great. And here we go. How can he have such a thing? How can he have images of the moon? The Haksiv, right after the Torah records the Ten Commandments for the first time, the Torah says the words, these are the words, Loi sasun iti, don't make with me. These words without the oral Torah, Pasha doesn't work. Don't make with me. Now really the continuation of the verse is, Loi sasun iti, right, given Elokei kesev, Elokei zov, or really we say Elohei, because it's an idol. Don't make with me a silver god, a golden god, a little with a little g. Don't make idols. Chazal Darshan, the meaning of the words Loi Sasun Iti means Loi Sasun Kidemus Shamoshai. You shall not make images of my servants. Now, who are God's servants? You know what the answer is? Everything that God created. But we're going to see soon. We're going to see soon how narrow or how broad do we apply it. And it came on the kasha was that we understood in the beginning, and so is the emes, that we're not allowed to make images of the heavenly bodies, of the sun or of the moon. As we'll see at the end, Goyim could, Jews cannot.
Isn't it because back then they used to worship it?
So one of the reasons will be because they used to worship it. There's another issue. Not only may we not make it, but even owning it, as we'll see in the end, is also problematic during the time that people worshipped idols. That's a rabbinic issue. It's called chshad, because people are going to see you with as they're going to think maybe you're worshiping it. There's two issues. You're not allowed to make it, midoiraisa, and then you can't even own it. But we're going to go into the details on the base. First, you can't make it. Now, how do you know this applies to the moon? So Abaya began to push back even. No, it's not so bad. It's very limited. And we're going to have back and forth baraisas that keep on broadening the Isur until it's going to become absolutely clear from Torah Shabbal Peh, from baraisas, that we may not make an image of the sun and the moon. Now, does that mean just that today you cannot make even a drawing, or does it only mean don't make a three-dimensional image? That's a big machlokes in Rishonim. It's a machlokes in Poskim, and we actually will paskin, like the Mechaber, that when it comes to the heavenly bodies, not to people, even a drawing for us to make is problematic. Of the sun, the moon, and the constellations. Goyim are allowed to make it. Nowadays, that people don't worship them in our society, we can own it. But let's go back to the Gemara. You can't make these images. So first, Abaya attempts to answer, guys, 3 lines before the bottom. We'll finish the daf today, God willing. That loy asra toira ela shamashim she'ef shel asoisim kamoisim. Answer number 1 is, nah. My servants, you know what it means? You know what serves God? The Beis HaMikdash and the Kelim in the Beis HaMikdash. That which you can make replica, God says don't make a replica. What do you mean, don't make an image of the sun? It's not even, it's so far off the sun. The sun is the sun. Your image is just your little image. It's not even shaykh. The problem is only, don't make something which you can taka make. What can we make a replica of? Real replica? Building a home that is exactly in the dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash. Well, Marshall, the Catholic Church, they violated that also, aside of all the other avedas of murder v'chuli that they do. But they went ahead and they made in the Rome, they made rooms in the dimension of the Beis HaMikdash, because God said not to do it. Oh, Kidatanya. Loyasa Adam Bayis, you're not allowed to build a home which is exactly Ketavnis Heichel, which has the form of the sanctuary. You're not allowed to make a pavilion that is Tavnis Ulam, that looks like the antechamber. You're not allowed to make a chutzner that has the exact dimensions of the Azara. That's about the building. Similarly, you cannot make a table that looks like the table, that is a replica of the table. Now, you know, people make models. If it's not the same size, then you can do it. You know, you want to just get the proportions. Beautiful models that people make for educational reasons. But to make exactly the size of the shulchan or menorah, keneged menorah, you can't do that. Aval oisa daf chav daled amid beis. But if he's speaking specifically about the menorah, which is probably the oldest Jewish symbol, you can't make it if it's exact. But if you make a candelabra, the top of the amid shal chamisha, that only has 5 lamps, or only has 6 lamps, or only has 8 lamps, it's already dissimilar, then it's okay. You know, thus the Rebbe's insistence that since the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash was not circular, it was angular, and don't be afraid, and our menorahs are shel shmoina, we should make it, it's not the same, we're not violating, but it should be the right, instead of circular, it should be angular. But Vishel Shiva Lo Yas, I want you to know that, you know, the famous question on Hanukkah, why do we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days if the miracle only really happened for 7 days, because the oil was naturally enough for one? One of the answers is this, that if we would have celebrated Hanukkah for 7 days, then people might have erroneously made a menorah exactly in the same dimensions. Now, you can say, but our menorahs won't have all the ornaments. Even in the Beis HaMikdash, you know, when we had the mitzvah of putting all of the ornaments, the goblets, the cups, v'chulei, that's only if it was made out of gold. And even in the Beis HaMikdash, as we'll see in a moment, when the menorah, after the goyim stole it or they contaminated it, when we started to rededicate after the story of Hanukkah, and initially we had very inexpensive menorahs, then none of the decorations, there were no goblets, there were no knobs, there was no flowers, there was none of that. In other words, if the menorah has the same dimensions and it has 7 lamps, you got yourself a problem. You violated an Isur D'Oraisa. And now the Braisa continues. Afilo shel sha'ar mini matches or matachis, even if you're making a menorah out of other metals, or you're making so you can argue, I'm not making an exact replica because it's not gold. No, that's a problem. Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda Omer, I'll tell you what, not only may you not make an exact replica from any other metal, af shaleitz lo yaseh, don't even make it out of wood. You know why? Because kederech she'asu malchi beis chashmonai. Because right after the story of the miracle of Hanukkah, we were then impoverished, and when the first menorah that we rededicated was a wooden menorah. And it's amazing that we have a historical machloikas, which is very rare. And Amru Loi, they told Rabbi Yossi, no, Misham, Raya, what that we know about that menorah. It wasn't made out of wood. Indeed, Shpudim, spits, Shal Barzel Hoyu, it was spits of the arms were spits of iron. Again, the word spit is to be medayik, that it wasn't ornamented. Because if it's not made out of gold, then you didn't put all of those beautiful designs. And really, it was iron. Only that, v'chipun beba'atz, they plated it with tin. Why are we saying tin? Because tin, with a relatively small, short passage of time, time ravages everything. Time changes everything, at least everything that's gashmi. So time will make tin look like wood. You're laughing. All right. It's okay. V'chipun beba'atz. And then, just to know that we didn't leave such a simple menorah, but shiur, when the community got wealthier, asum shal kesef, we made it out of silver. Chazra ve'shiru asum shal zahav. Bottom line is that we know that we may not make replicas of the temple and of the temple kalim. Parenthetically, the Gavaldike Institute, called the Holy Temple Institute, they can make kalim because they're making it for the Beis Hamikdash. That's a mitzvah to make. Okay, so Abaye is saying, hold on, who's told you that loisasun iti includes the moon? Counters the Gemara, what the shamashim, shi'i, efshel asoisam kamoisam, what you think all of the other servants of God, even though we cannot make a real perfect replica, mishari, is it permitted? V'hatanya, so the Gemara is constantly pulling out new braises. It says, again, loisasun iti, what does that mean? Loisasun kedemus shamashay. Don't make something in the image of those who serve me. Which servants? The Braisa adds, Hamishamshim lefanai b'amarim, those who serve me up in the heavens. Up in the heavens, you don't have a heichol dira betachtonim, my friends. The Beis Hamikdash got to be here. So it does include heavenly servants. Amar Abaye, I know what that means. Perhaps, at least he's beginning. He's just trying to limit it. Lo yasra toira, you know what you may not do? Ela demus arba panim b'hadi adadi. So we have the Nevuah Yecheskel, and he saw the MERCAVA, and on the MERCAVA he saw four faces. There were beings. Obviously, all these things have to be taken out of the Gashmi, but in a Ruchnias Dike image, he saw beings that had four faces. And a Kiyadua, so Pnei Arya El Hayamin, the lion is Chesed, Pnei Shoyer, the ox was to the left, the Neshed, let's interpret the Neshed as an eagle. And then the Hasidus, how can it be that a lion and an eagle, they're not kosher animals? How can it be on the MERCAVA? And then you had the Pnei Adam or the Keruvia and Pnei Yaakov Avinu. Aryeh Shoyer Nesher Yaakov. So if you make an image if you make a physical replica of those four faces together, that is also what's asur. So he's agreeing. You can't make a replica of the Holy Temple, you can't make a replica of the Kalim, and you can't make an image, whether it's a graven image, whether it's a statue, or whether it's even only a drawing of Arba Panim Adi Adadi. So the Gemara says it can't be, don't limit Abaye to this, because according to what Abaye said, it sounds like that if you only make the face of a person, you're okay. What Ela Ma'ata, parts of Adam L'chudei Tishtri, are you allowed to make an image of a person by himself? Because in the MERCAVA, there wasn't an image of a person. There was only the four faces together. If that would be the case, then why, the Gemara is asking, Alama Tanya, why does it say that Kol HaPartzufos Mutarin, you are allowed to make a statue of all faces of God's beautiful world. You can make a chveis nishvos, you can make a deer, you can make a lamb, chutz mi parts of Adam. But to make, let's go with the way we paskin, but to make a three-dimensional image, or even a protruding image of the face of an Adam, you're not allowed to do. There's so much this.
Is that a sculpture
We're speaking about a sculpture, and even on the coins that we have, you have I don't know, Abraham Lincoln. I don't know who they put on the coins. Now there are many Rishonim that say that even though it says parts of Adam and parts of means a face, it means the whole body. That would be their heter when it comes to the coins, even though we didn't make it. Can you even have it? Because it's not a full person. Many argue. Many hold that no, that model Beis HaMikdash we said is not exactly in the dimensions. It's just proportional. Okay. Listen, we're running through this. This is a big topic. And by the way, parts of Adam, there are certain things that we may not do, but if it was done, we can have it when there's no chashad, which will be like a coin. Because we take a hold that even just a parts of Adam is usher for us to make. We can't make a bust of a human face. We can't even make a coin. We cannot mint a coin that has, unless there's a certain deformation, as we'll see in a moment. So again, you see, it's not only the arba panim. So Amar Afunim B'nei Rabidi. All right, don't challenge Abaya. Abaya already addressed this in the past. Mi pirkei da Abaya shemiali. I already heard the lecture from Abaya, where Abaya added loy sasun iti, loy sasun oisi. Another limud. You're right. Abaya already agreed that don't make my image. When God says my image, that means a human form. In other words, so far, you can't make an exact replica of the temple and of the utensils. You cannot make an image of just a human being. And if you already have an image of a human being and you're going to add to it the other three faces of the MERCAVA, the Aliyah, the shiur, and the nesher, then you violated another violation. But not more than that. Until now, we don't have a proof that it's so. Until now, maybe you can make of the moon. So the Gemara says that it can't be. But could you make other servants? Can you make an image? No. Another brayse, it says here, so far that we had these words above. Don't make an image of those who serve me up on high. Keep going. You can't make an image of the oifanim, which is one level of angels. You can't make an image of the srafim. You can't make an image of the chayes hakodesh. You cannot make an image of the malachi hashares. It's not just what you said above. It's more than that. How do you know what the oifanim look like? I don't know. But yeah, if a person says, I was davening Shemona Esrei and Yichog Yizem the Chayes HaKodesh and I want to make it, you can't do that. Okay. Amar Abaye says, okay, fine. You have a proof. It's more inclusive that I said, but let's stick to what it says in the Braisa. So not only can you not make a replica of the temple and of the Kalim and of the four faces of the MERCAVA and only of a human face, add to that, you cannot make a physical representation of those servants who live in a spiritual world. But the details, Al Pinigla, he quotes from Chagiga, there are seven heavens, these Ifanim and the Srafim and the Chayes HaKodesh, they come from the seventh heaven. The sun, the moon, and the stars and the constellations are what we call in the second heaven. They're Gashmi and they're Ruchni. So something that's Ruchni is we cannot make an image of. Almost a paradox. If it's Ruchni, how do you know what it looks like? But if you think that's what it looks like, that's exactly what you may not do. Keminig, all of these goyim that they make images of malachim. And by the way, there is no female angels. We know that from the Shulchan Aruch, from Rosh Hashana, from Yom Kippur. So they're off. But if they make a statue of a male of Malach Machol, then it's a problematic. Okay, so in other words, all Abai is trying to push back is that find me a source that you cannot make a graven image of the moon. So far we didn't find, but the Gemara is continuing. But the ones, the servants of God that are already Gashmi, which includes the sun and the moon and the stars and the constellations, is that allowed? Forget about the pasuk le'sasuniti. Let's go to the 10 dibras. What's the second dibra? So it says, don't make a graven image. Asher bashamayim, representing that which is in the heaven. What does that mean? Says the Braisa, l'rabois chamo u'levano kichava mazolis. You may not do that. When it says mima'al nachmeta pazer l'rabois malachi yasharis, you can't make a graven image. So the Gemara answers, no. You're confusing two things. That the dibra, that's not a problem of just making it. You can't make it to worship it. It's not only can you not worship it, you're not allowed to make it if you are making it to worship it. Ki tanya yila of them. Counters the Gemara, if the limitation of this lav is only if you are making it to worship it, then why are we only prohibited to make a graven image of the sun if you're going to worship it? What, can I make a graven image of a worm if someone, God forbid, plans to worship it? So the Gemara says, yeah, and a keep on reading the Braisa. The Tanya. Let's keep on reading the oral interpretation, the oral giloi of the words of the Aseret Sadibris, of the second commandment. When it says, Bashamayim, we're up to Mimal Malachi Asharis. Asher Ba'aretz, L'Rabbis, you may not make an image of a mountain, of a tall mountain, of a Gavois, of a hill, of Yamam, of the seas, Naharis rivers, Afikim streams, Vigeyois in the valley. You can't make it if you're making it to worship it. You can't make. And when it says Mitachas, under the ground, L'Rabbis Shushul Katan. Okay. In other words, so far, if you're making an image to worship it, you may not make an image of anything. Not only if you are not worshiping it, not you, someone else, but even the maker is not allowed to make it. But if it's not being made for it to be worshipped, then you can make it of the sun and the moon. The Gemara says it's not true. Vasiya greidesam mishari v'hatayim. We learned in a Braisa again. Loy sasun iti, loy sasun kedemu shamashay hameshamshem lefanai. And here we have that's already a checkmate. Kigoin, not this example is not about the ifanim and the srafim and the chayis hakodesh. Kigoin chama ulavana kichavim umazolis. Now we got a problem. It's not a checkmate, but it's a check. So one of the applications of don't make with me means don't make an image of the sun and the moon. Here's the moon here. So how can Rabbi Gamliel have those images? Answers the Gemara, here we go. The prohibition of making an image of the sun and the moon, not for it to be worshipped, just you can't make it, that is a lav like most of the Torah given to the Jewish people. A goy is allowed to make a statue, a bust, you can make it of the sun and the moon. A yid is not allowed to make it. Question is, am I allowed to ask a goy to do something for me that I cannot do for myself? That is included in the Isur of Amira La'akum. And it's not only for Shabbos. But one of the areas where we don't have a problem of asking a goy to do something if there is a mitzvah need. Rabbi Gamliel wasn't collecting art. He wanted to make sure that if witnesses really saw the new moon and they're going to fail the interrogation because they didn't understand what the Dayan was asking, or they didn't read, the Dayan didn't understand what, this is such an easy way of solving that. Did it look like this? Did it look like that? There's a mitzvah need. So Shani, Rabbi Gamliel, the Achedim Asuloi. Achedim means non-Jewish people. They are allowed to make it for them. He commissioned them. And that's the Tosfos here. Again, Amira La'akum, B'makei mitzvah, L'tzoyrech mitzvah is allowed. But now we got another problem. And here's the other problem. The other problem is that there's two issues. I'm not allowed to make an image. I'm not allowed to own an image if people will think that I, God forbid, might be worshiping it. So when you live in a society where the peoples around, they had these getchkelach, they had these statues that they worshiped, that they attributed divinity into them, like today in the Far East, right, these little Buddhas all over the place. So then you can't have something that people will suspect that you are also worshiping it. So how can he own it? Huh? It's called chshad. Chshad is worse, I think. Okay, chshad of avodah zarah. Now, you know one of the common items that had protruding images was rings, signet rings. Men used to use rings. They weren't ornamental, they were functional. They were seals. And look at this. Rav, the great Rav Yehuda, the Talmud of Rav, who became a Talmud of Shmuel, he had a signet ring that he didn't make. The Achedim Asui Loi. Now, whether it had a face protruding or the images of the sun or the moon, it was one of those two. Something that a Jew cannot make. Others made it for him. Now, was it a tzorech mitzvah? That's a big question, but maybe he didn't even commission, maybe he just got it as a gift. That's even less problematic. He didn't even ask them. Va'amar lei Shmuel, his second teacher, told him, Rav Yehuda, with respect, Shinana, you sharp one, or you toothy one. Samei eina dedain. Samei eina dedain means deface it. It's very important. Doesn't mean blind the eye. Defacing it actually means what we do is we chip the nose. And that's a halachic concept. In other words, that even in the Rebbe's earlier years, before it became common for us to accept pictures of people, when it was still controversial, the Rebbe, in many of the earlier pictures, you'll see him with his thumb on his nose. He does something, he covers his nose a little bit. Because if the nose is covered, or let's go to a real image of a person, meaning not an image, a protruding image, a statue. If you have one, you have to chip the nose. So he told him, deface the ring. But the question is, why would he have to deface it? If you're telling me that if you didn't make it, if others made it for you, it's a non-problem, so why did he have to deface it? So answers the Gemara, over there, there it was a protruding ring. The image that he had, that Rav Yehuda, was protruding. And the issue of you may not make it is not a problem if you didn't make it. But there is another problem, chashad. Umishum chashada. Now, obviously, the question will be, why wasn't there chashad for Rabban Gamliel? The Gemara is going to address that. Here's where the Gemara says this too. You may not make it. Issue number one. That is resolved if you didn't make it. If a guy made it for you, a guy can make it. A guy cannot make it to worship. But if a guy made it, then you can own it. That's one issue. Not only that, b'makah mitzvah, you can commission the guy to make it. There is another issue, rabbinic, chashad. And because of chashad, Shmuel tells Rabbi Yehuda, you got yourself a nice signet ring, say goodbye to it. Deform it, deface it. Now, Kedetanya, beferish. Tabas, now like this. When it comes to a human being, the problem, we're saying way we paskin now. The problem of making a form of a human being is only if it's three-dimensional, which will include a signet ring that's protruding. Now, many signet rings, the image was actually indented in it. So when you would use it, the wax would be protruding. Can you own such a signet ring? So this is what the Baraisa says. Just when I finish one point. This halachic acceptance, that the problem of making a form of a human being is only if it's three-dimensional, many poskim say, when it comes to the heavenly bodies, the problem is even if it's not three-dimensional, even if it's a picture, even if it's a drawing. Why? Because a human being, we see each other from up close. I see you three-dimensional. So if I make a replica of you that's not three-dimensional, it's not a real replica. It's like a tzamach. It's like making a replica of a temple thing is smaller. But when it comes to the heavenly bodies, from our perspective, it's only two-dimensional. We're not close enough to see the depth of the moon or of the sun. So when you make an image of it, it's similar even if it's not three-dimensional, and we're not allowed to do it.
Picture this big is...
Okay, let's go weiter. If we own it, it's not a problem. If we're making it, it's a problem. Hassan, over there, the ring was a protruding ring. The image was protruding. If it's if the metal on the ring or whatever other material, the image is protruding on the ring, don't keep it. Don't keep it the way it is. Deface it. Because that ring itself, chashada. But you can use it. We're not saying you, but if you have, and you use it, because when you use it, then the wax is indented. If you just ask him to, if the ring has an image that's depressed, so then that ring, the first white line, then you can keep that ring, but you can't use it because then the wax will be protruding. Now, before we come back to why wasn't there a chashad with the images of Rabban and Gamliel, the Gemara is going to just address this concept of suspicion. Is there such a thing? There was a shul that was in the city of Nahar Da'ah, and they called that shul Shav and Yosef, or the neighborhood was called Shav and Yosef. Now Rashi, this is not the first time we had this. When the Yidden went into Golus, in the times of Yechaniah, they took certain parts of the Beis Hamikdash with them. Shav means they dismantled it, or parts that the Goyim dismantled, they took with them and they built it into the shul over there, awaiting for Mashiach for them to bring it back to Yerushalayim. And they called that shul Shav and Yosef, dismantled and resettled. And the Shechina was there. In front of that shul, the Havabei Andarta, there was a statue of the king. That was the minig. That to give honor to the local governor, you made a statue there was a statue of the king. That's a full three-dimensional image of a human being. Now, it was not made to worship. It was not made by Yidden. We owned it. So there was no violation of thou shalt not make it. But now that we're adding another dimension, it's not only about you or me, a Yid, making it. Even if Goyim make it, but there's a suspicion, how were they allowed to keep it there? And don't think that people did not see it. V'hava Eile, who went into that shul? Rav went into that Shmuel. Shmuel went into the Shmuel. It was his shtetl, his city. And the father of Shmuel and Levi, and they all davened there. So the Gemara answers, no. When you have a statue in a public place, people, even they didn't have such a taiva then. In public, a statue is not a problem. Rabbim shiny. No, you're not going to suspect that everyone is worshiping in front of a shul. So far-fetched, there's no chshad. And now, what about Rabban Gamliel? Because he had it in his attic, chshad. So answers the Gemara, Kivan the Nasi, you know, he was the head of the Sanhedrin. Who do you think went up there? Everyone was going to his office the whole time. It was in a public place. It's like the Rabbin. Number one. Number two, Iba Yisema. Now this is not going to the chashad. This is going back to the first question. How can you even make it? It wasn't commissioned by the Goyim, or it was commissioned by the Goyim. There's different ways. But what Goyim made was they took the moon and they had it made in different sections. Now, it was made in a way where it's easily assembled, easily disassembled. So now we're learning another thing. If Goyim makes something that you can assemble and disassemble, even if the Jew is the one that's doing the assembling, he's not making it. There's no chashad, because by the very fact that it wasn't a solid moon, you see, people don't worship that. It was a Lego moon. And the final answer, he made it. When is a Jew not allowed to make an image, including of the sun and the moon, and according to many, not even a picture, according to others, only a three-dimensional protrusion? That's if you are making it, let's say, stam. You're making it for art. If you're making it to worship, you can't make even a worm. But if you are making it because you need it to learn, you need it's functional, to ask the witnesses, that's b'chlal allowed. And where do we find that from? Like it says, and this is a pasuk in Shoftim, after Hashem reiterates that we're not allowed to practice witchcraft and sorcery, and also you can't make images. And it says in the Chumash, don't learn these arts in order for you to practice them. From there we learn that to practice, God forbid, we can't even learn it to practice it. But if a person is learning a certain witchcraft, because if someone is being judged for practicing sorcery, they're going to be punished in Beis Din. How do the judges know that this person indeed learned sorcery if they don't know sorcery? So if they're learning it for them to know it, or in our case, they're learning for them to understand and to teach it. In the case, this verse also includes making images. So if Rabbi Gamliel made it, he hired Yidden to make it. They made it in order to teach the witnesses to show me the moon. That it wasn't like this or was like that. That is not a problem not to make it. Does that answer the chshada? That's the big topic. According to many, that doesn't resolve the chshada. The chshada was already resolved before because it wasn't a public place. Or because it was leprakim, God willing, to be continued.